Welcome to this episode of Let's Be Civil. My guest today on Let's Be Civil is Justine Fedde. Justine Fedde is a transportation engineer who specializes in roadway and related infrastructure design for both public and private clients throughout Colorado. Justine is also co-chair of the Colorado Springs Planning Committee of WTS Colorado, which plans local events to advance women in transportation. All right, I want to welcome everybody to another edition of Let's Be Civil, the civil engineering podcast. We are coming from our usual location in Schertz, Texas, and talking with someone who is in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is not far from where I spent a few years of my youth in Boulder. And Justine tells me she's been to Boulder many times. It's probably driven by my house. I told her where it was. Next time she goes, she can go sneak a peek at one of the places I used to live. I just remember, and my brothers are the same way, that living there when we were kids, the yard seemed like it was 100 yards long because we would play outside. And I drive by now in 2 steps, and I'd be from one end of the yard to the next end, to the other end of the yard. And as a kid, it just seemed like a huge yard to be out playing around in. So it's something. And I've got a nice little scar that I've had right across there from when my brother tackled me on a sprinkler head in the yard, split my head wide open. My mom's an RN, so blood's pouring out of my head. Actually, I'm laying down on the ground. My eye socket is pooling with blood. And my mom saw me and thought that I had poked my eye out. So there's a memory for me from home in Colorado, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what's been going on in Justine's life since her time as a student at Valpo, and co-author on a paper. It took a little while to get the paper all tightened up and out the door and published, but it has been. And so she did some work for me when we were at Valpo, and actually pretty significant stuff in terms of having an impact on some ASTM standards. So I think that's pretty cool. It's one of the things I think is neat of the work that I've been involved in. So, but she's been to North Dakota and back, and now in Colorado Springs. So tell us a little bit about leaving Indiana to go to North Dakota. What because most people are not going to go, I'm going to North Dakota. That's usually not what you hear. So
yeah. So I went to a SWE conference my senior year, and I was looking for a job, any job. And I met 2 women at lunch that I talked to, Melissa and Sarah. And we talked for a while. I gave my resume, and like every other resume I handed out there, I was hopeful, but not overly optimistic that anything would come from it. And Melissa passed it on to her boss, who reached out to me. And after a couple of rounds of interviews, I got the job in North Dakota, and I was like, why not Minot? So ended up moving to Minot, North Dakota, because that was the most interesting job offer that I'd gotten. And I worked up there doing road design, highway design, and highway construction, highway construction was fascinating and influences my experience doing that construction, influences my design to this day. So I think the 2 years I spent in the field were incredibly beneficial for me in terms of understanding why information needs to be on the paper and what's relevant and what's not relevant, which some of my fellow designers who haven't spent any time in the field have really struggled with. So I spent a couple of years up in North Dakota doing design and then the road construction in the summers, um, while the oil boom was booming. And then when that busted, um, things changed there. Funding went away. Lots of opportunities changed. And so I was laid off and found a job in Colorado Springs because there was lots of opportunity down here, and I've been down here ever since. So that's the quick 10-second
Sure. No.
story.
And I just was going to mention you're at home, like, a lot of us are at home, and your internet's struggling a little bit. So there may be a few hiccups here, but we're gonna push on through. So what was in your, I joke around with you a little bit about the North Dakota stuff because we lived in South Dakota for, from 2003 until 9, so like 6 years, something on that order of magnitude. And people are surprised. If you go around and you say that you lived in North Dakota or South Dakota, you'll be the only person that they've ever heard of that has lived in these places. So what did you think of when you realized you were going to move to North Dakota?
Well, growing up, my cousins had been on a road trip and counted license plates, and they saw 49 states. They found out in Alaska and Hawaii, but they didn't find a North Dakota. And they were from Chicago, so it's not that far. And so growing up, we always joked about North Dakota is imaginary. It doesn't exist. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go work in the imaginary state.
Okay, that's pretty fun.
You drive into the state, and their state tourism marketing is legendary North Dakota, which didn't really help the argument that it existed. But it really got involved with the community up there, and the people up there were fantastic. And but I had no idea what I was getting into moving to North Dakota, and Minot in particular with the Air Force Base and being very much a military town was not something that I'd ever experienced having grown up in Metro Detroit.
So when you got there, so you did, how much did you go there before accepting the job? Or were the interviews?
I had not visited North Dakota.
Okay. So interviews and everything were elsewhere or on the phone or anything like that. So, so when you got there, what did you think when you arrived? I mean, was it like, what did I do? Or were you gung ho and hey, bring it on? Or
it was a little overwhelming. So I graduated on Saturday, and then on Sunday we packed up my apartment, and Monday Dad and I hit the road and took us 3 days in our U-Haul at 55 miles an hour, towing my car to drive all the way to North Dakota, all the way to Minot. I'd rented an apartment sight unseen because I needed something, and that was the only way I could get something guaranteed, and everything was super expensive because it was the middle of the oil boom. So Dad helped me unpack, get into my apartment, and then we dropped him off at the airport, and then I'm like, all right, North Dakota. I know nobody.
Right.
Hopefully this office will be good. Hopefully I'll meet some good people at work.
Right.
I show up to work, and they first told me, come to Fargo for your first week so that we can do your onboarding with a larger group. So I went to Fargo for that first week, stayed in the hotel there, and then it ended up, when I went back to Minot, I was actually the only person in that office. They were working on hiring an office manager and other people, but nobody else had said yes to Minot yet.
So you were alone in the city and alone at work.
Yes. 7 days after graduating college, I was in charge of an office.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah. So I've run an office. My office was 100% female.
Was it actually, as people got hired,
well, that was the thing. Nobody actually ended up saying yes.
Oh, really? So you were there by yourself?
For a year and a half or so, I was in Minot by myself, which is why I ended up transferring down to the Bismarck office and moving to Bismarck after a year and a half or so. Because at least that office had 10 or 12 people in it.
So what,
Pretty
I mean,
lonely up in mine.
so what was it like? I mean, so this is interesting. I mean, this is part of the casual conversation, and we just kind of see where things go. Is you're just recently graduated, so I mean, you get what I'm saying. Is you have no experience, right?
Yeah.
You're in an office. You're in charge. There is actually no one else there. So you don't have anybody to talk immediately or directly with about anything. You've got to either, you know, phone call or email or something like that to ask questions from somebody. So it had to be kind of cool to know that you were in charge. It had to be
also terrifying.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to. So, well, you know, ultimately, I guess you decided that
so there
really
were two
wasn't
other
what you wanted.
EITs. There were 2 EITs down in Bismarck, and as an EIT, they had a year or 2 more experience than me. So like straight out of college, that's a ton more experience.
Right.
So I would call those guys and leave my phone on speakerphone all day.
Okay.
Just so that there was somebody else to socialize with, and you know, the 2 of them shared an office, so the 3 of us were kind of always talking through what we were working on and what we were talking through design problems and just general socialization.
Right. So in some ways, you're well prepared for having to be in this circumstances that we are in today.
In some ways, but I've also realized that I don't really like it.
Right.
Which is why I keep like trying to find the place with the people.
Well, I will tell you that I think it's one of the things that is going to come out of this, and maybe already, is we're just not meant to be isolated like this. You know, because I mean, the only way I'm really getting through the day in a lot of respects is I go outside in our yard and I'm doing landscaping stuff. And we can talk about this, you know, after we're done offline, but I'm very much in the high risk group. So me leaving our property is limited, you know, so like you're saying, like mid-March, you know, so now 2 months, I've left the property very few times. And actually when I have, it's been to go to Lowe's or Home Depot to be able to continue the landscaping stuff. But yeah, and it is, yeah, you want to socialize. So think about this as kind of fascinating that you said what you said about keeping the phone on. Is now you'd have Teams open or Zoom or something. You'd be, you know, you guys would be able to at least, you know, see each other instead of just hear each other, and you do probably the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting way of functioning.
And I found that collaborative approach worked really well, even at my second job. Once I moved down to Colorado Springs, most of our office was located locally, but we had one guy who, for family reasons, had left the company, joined another company, and then came back, but was now working from his basement in Salt Lake City. And so he and I would similarly spend hours on the phone, and sometimes it was like, okay, let's talk through this design issue, this other thing. But it was also, let's talk fantasy football and how I'm kicking your butt. And
right. Nice.
about these new pickups, you know. So I found that socialization and being able to be on the phone with people and talk through both design and just general life stuff has been really beneficial.
So you mentioned, because I will comment on this, and then let's talk about this part a little bit, because you were an athlete at Valpo, swimmer, and that's something actually that Valparaiso is I think recognized for. I forget in any class I had, probably a quarter of the students were athletes in some sport, if not more than that. And so you had mentioned that you got involved in the community and got actually involved with the high school.
Yeah, my office in Minot was across the street from the high school, and I would watch the classes come out every day, and kids come out after school every day. And one day I just emailed the high school coach and said, "Hey, I have experience as a collegiate swimmer. Can I be an assistant coach with you?" And I met with him, and the practice schedule wasn't going to work with my work schedule. I couldn't get off work early enough to go over there, but he introduced me to the club coach. And with Kathy, I met her, and after one conversation, she was like, "All right, well, practice starts at 7 o'clock at this pool, so we'll see you there."
Okay.
And so I worked with Kathy and that club swim team for the time that I was in Minot when I wasn't out on construction. And then when I moved to Bismarck, she gave me an introduction to the Bismarck club team. So then I worked a lot with that Bismarck club team. It was huge. They won states. We won states every year. They're on like 8 or 9 years of winning states. And then I got involved with the high school coaching through that. Suddenly I was doing a lot of swim coaching along with engineering.
So you went from little sort of human interaction to a lot, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, most of the people that I hung out with were between the ages of 8 and 12, but
it's still somebody to talk to, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The other coaches were great to work with. And the kids.
So are you still swimming now?
I've taken a break. I took a break from it a while back, and then my son was born and haven't had a chance to really get back in the pool, but I'm doing lots of running now.
So how old is your son?
He's 13 months.
Okay. So, I mean, there are going to be swim lessons in the future. You'll be back in the pool.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a matter of time. Right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So are you going to teach him, or are you going to have someone else teach him how to swim?
For the basics, I'll have someone else, and then I'll probably, if he enjoys swimming and wants to do swim team, then I'll probably end up coaching for it, but I will try and coach groups that are not my son.
Right.
That doesn't go well.
No. So it's an interesting piece of your career that in some ways were challenging, but also from what I'm hearing from you is have had a significant and beneficial impact.
Oh yeah.
I mean, between being on your own and getting involved in the community, those things really have meant something to you and in your career. It sounds like it's actually helped you to be probably more collaborative than you may have imagined yourself. Is that fair to say? That you see you're doing more collaborative stuff, or at least you're recognizing it. So what else out of the North Dakota experience do you think had a strong impact on you? Because you talked about the field work.
Yeah. The field work and the project that I was on was not a project that went particularly well.
Okay.
Which, like, in the moment, you're like, oh, everything is going wrong. But it also makes your plan stronger in the future. It makes you understand why you do this or why you don't do this and what needs to be in. And we left one standard was left out, and it ended up costing $200,000 in change orders and things like that. So you learn to really check through some of those things, and it's so beneficial just to be like, okay, so when the pipe goes in the ground, you have to, you dig down, you dig a trench. You don't just put a pipe in the ground. There's more to that.
Right. Yeah.
Which on the design side, you're like, and there's a pipe there. Done.
Yeah. It's that's a piece of this, and it's a very good point to make, is that what's on paper and what has to actually happen out in the field are two different things.
Yeah. I mean, even like earthwork, you think, okay, well, here's my profile, here's my alignment, and it's done. But earthwork, like, that's 70% of your costs, and it's 70% of the time for the, not quite, but it's a big piece, and you watch those big machines move 6 inches of dirt at a time so you can test it and make sure that you're meeting compaction, and it's a long summer.
So, because I want to ask you another question, but you brought something up that sparked something in me. As a citizen, as just a person living in an area, and you see a construction project, and particularly any kind of highway work, because it impacts you as you drive around, you look and go, nobody's ever there. It's taken forever. Why can't this thing get built in, a shorter amount of time? But you're talking about, what you're mentioning is that these are reasons why. This is part of why, it takes what it does. I remember in North Carolina, they finished working at 3 o'clock in the morning because the humidity level there was so unbearable that you couldn't go past 3 o'clock in the morning and have people out on a job site and work. So there never was anybody on a job site during the daytime when people would be driving through. It was all night.
Well, and you've got traffic and other considerations to, peak hour, making sure that people can still get through.
Yeah.
We were lucky most of our project was through Virgin Earth, but that comes with its own pile of difficulties, but we didn't have to worry about traffic.
Right, which is huge. So if I'm asking a question that brings up any like feelings, just say so and we'll move on. So you got laid off. And understandably, I think you would say understandably the bubble bursts and
the bubble burst and
right. But somebody had to tell you that you were laid off and you had to deal with that. So do you mind kind of talking about what that's like?
It was messy.
Okay.
I was not expecting it. It was a Friday afternoon. I had a meeting scheduled with my boss who'd come up from Fargo. And I went home for lunch that day and my office manager was like, "You're coming back, right? You'll be back in the office later this afternoon." I was like, "Yeah, I've got a meeting with my boss. I'll be back for that."
So you didn't know, and they knew.
I had no idea. No, I knew that things weren't good. I knew we hadn't won a lot of work lately. I wasn't expecting to be laid off that day, but I did know that things were, that it was just a hard time to be in the civil engineering industry. Like NDDOT had done a lot of design work and now had a lot of projects sitting on the shelf that were going to wait until they had funding to build. So they weren't even putting out a ton of design work anymore. So I'd go in for the meeting with my boss and he's got the pink folder and starts talking through it all. And I started crying immediately, which is, not the thing you want to do, but I probably cried for 2 hours straight, cleaning out my desk. My office manager was standing behind me, watching me get whatever files I needed off my computer and make sure that I didn't, torch the whole server. Right. Which didn't occur to me until after I'd left, so it was fine there. But packed up got all the stuff out of my cube into my car, left, drove over to my husband's office, had him meet me in the parking garage, and I was like, "So, I just got laid off."
Literally, it was within moments of being told something, you were packing up your stuff.
I think our meeting probably took 10 minutes for him to give me the severance package and any other paperwork that I needed. And this was February 24th, which is relevant because my insurance was only good till the end of February on the 28th. So then I had to, once I told my husband that I got laid off, I went home, had to figure out temporary insurance for the next month because 4 days is not a lot of time.
No, yeah.
Had to start figuring out how to apply for unemployment, how to, there's lots of stuff you have to do.
Right.
But Kevin and I had been talking about moving to Colorado for a while. It's where he grew up, and so he was really itching to get back into the mountains, and I was looking for some kind of a new adventure anyway. Okay. So we're like, I guess we're looking for moving to Colorado.
So maybe
we'll move to Colorado.
Right. So how What would you say, how long did it take to really sort of sink in that, you know, this is done, we're moving someplace, I have to start looking? I mean, you know, like the mechanical part kicks in that, like you said, you got to figure out insurance, unemployment, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's not realizing that, yeah, I really have to look for a new job, you know?
I mean, I hadn't been happy for a while, so I'd been thinking about, do I want a new job in North Dakota? Do I want to move somewhere else? I was like, I'm going to get my PE. I was scheduled to take my PE in October. This was February. I was like, I'll get my PE and then I'll move on. You know, just get that checked off.
Right.
So this changed my plans a little bit.
So it just moved it quicker.
Yeah.
So it wasn't October PE and then February. It was
no,
February.
it was February to October. Yeah. And yeah, so that changed that plan. Dang, all the best laid plans, right?
Right.
Yeah, so the amount, I think I called my mom later that afternoon and I was like, guess I'm not working for them anymore. I wasn't enjoying it anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
So that sunk in pretty quick. And then, you know, the month of unemployment was one of the most fun months of my life.
Well, so I was going to ask, I was going to say, like, how long did you wait until you really started to look for a job? Did you take a breather or anything like that?
Unemployment required that I apply for 4 jobs every week.
Okay.
So I would do my research, figure out which 4 jobs I was applying to, go to I'd already paid for my March memberships on like the YMCA and the pool. And so I was like, I'm going to go work out at noon and I'm going to go to this class and I'm going to go for a walk and do this. I know which jobs I'm applying to. At like 3:30 on Friday, I would apply to my 4 jobs. And I was like, this is okay. We got money. We're fine right now. I'm going to just kind of enjoy this.
Okay. So you did that for a month?
Yeah.
I think you might have done it for longer.
I know. So like the 3rd week or so, I did my like 3:30 on Friday, apply for a job, don't actually expect any responses. And I got a response back from this guy at like 3:45. And I'm like, oh, come on, I wasn't ready for this.
And this was from Colorado Springs?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I ultimately ended up talking to 3 companies, one in Denver and 2 in Colorado Springs, that I did online interviews with them, and then 2 that I interviewed with in person before making a decision and coming out to Colorado Springs. But I was also, Kevin and I had just gone on our honeymoon, 3 years late, but we went on our honeymoon to New Zealand.
Oh, cool.
His parents were living there at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I was applying to some jobs there too. And like the day I accepted my job in Colorado Springs, I got a call back from a job in New Zealand. Like, come on.
I don't know. I can tell you another side story here in a couple minutes because we're getting close to the time. But something like that happened to me too. Is that my first day of work, I got a call from somebody asking me to take another job. So,
and I'd done that before for an internship. I'd actually showed up for the first 2 days of an internship and then changed my internship.
So we got a few minutes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, you know, what you're doing now in the job that you actually have now.
So right now I am a transportation engineer with Wilson & Company Engineers and Architects. So that means that, and I did end up getting my PE.
Excellent. So
that was a fun story in and of itself. I was supposed to take the test in April and I checked on like December 7th or something. I was like, okay, let's figure out this whole application process. And the deadline for Colorado's application was December 2nd. So I started looking, okay, what other states can I go take this in? And Utah was close by and I was like, all right, let's go to Utah. So I ended up going to Utah because their deadline was way later.
Yeah.
took my PE test in Utah. First and last time I've been to Utah so far. But got my PE and,
Well,
flying with your whole backpack of every single transportation book imaginable.
right. Just think of Utah maybe as your new imaginary state.
Yeah.
Since you actually have lived in North Dakota. So
yeah.
We're basically, at the time here. So hang on, because I want to spend a couple more minutes with you off the podcast here. But I want to thank you for being a guest on Let's Be Civil podcast, and we need to not be strangers anymore here going forward. It's one of the things I think is going to be kind of neat, at least for me, is reconnecting with people and having an easy way to have some conversations and stay in touch. So good talking to you.
Yeah, it's been good, John.